Resident Evil 8 is out, and no doubt new and old fans alike are wondering which order the series goes in. After all, Resident Evil has a very complicated canon, dozens of spin-offs, a handful of animated movies, and countless pharmaceutical companies to keep aware of, all forming this web of Resident Evil canon. Well, today I thought I'd save you the job of multiple internet searches and explain to you the order to play and watch Resident Evil. First, you want to start with Resident Evil 0, correctly named as this is the prologue to the franchise. You'll play as Rebecca Chambers, a member of an elite group of officers known as STARS, and Billy Cohen, an ex-army veteran and escaped convict. The two work together to escape the Arklay Mountains outside of Raccoon City, whilst also uncovering the plot of shady pharmaceutical company Umbrella and their research at a hidden training facility in the woods. Here you'll witness your first BOWs, or biological weapons, such as mutated animals, hunters, and the Tyrant. Resident Evil 0 has a brilliant first act, and the rest of the game does well in mirroring the gameplay loop of a lot of the Resident Evil games to come. This will then lead you straight into the first Resident Evil. I highly suggest playing the remake, and it'll begin with Alpha Team flying to the mountains via helicopter to rescue Bravo Team from Resident Evil 0. As they're attacked by zombie dogs, Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Albert Wesker and Barry Burton enter the same nearby mansion and split up to find any survivors. Resident Evil is one of the best, most memorable games in the series and is certainly a must play. You'll get introduced to 4 of the main characters in the series, and if you're playing as Chris, you'll meet back up with Rebecca Chambers. These next 2 games you can pass if you like. These are simple side stories. Resident Evil Outbreak highlights the T-Virus travelling down from the Arklay Mountains and hitting Raccoon City. You'll play as a varied cast of different survivors during the beginning of the Raccoon City incident. Outbreak File 2 is what you can play next if you don't skip these. Outbreak 2 expands on the first game, featuring more episodic style levels following different survivors during this epidemic. Outbreak 2's most important chapter is the one that shows what happened to the Raccoon City Police Department, and specifically police officer Marvin Branner, before his appearance in our next game on the timeline. Next, I recommend playing Resident Evil 2, this being the perfect follow-up to Outbreak 2 and the first game with one of the playable characters being Chris Redfield's younger sister, Claire Redfield, who enters the town to find her brother. She is accompanied by rookie cop Leon S. Kennedy, who was heading to the RCP station for his first day on the job. However, the outbreak has already begun. You'll get to see Marvin Branner from Outbreak 2 for the last time, and you'll play one of the best adventures in the series. Resident Evil 2 introduces Mr. X, a super tyrant sent to get rid of any evidence of Umbrella's involvement in the epidemic. Ada Wong, a mysterious double agent who is there to get data, Hunk, another cryptic Umbrella agent who is successful in retrieving the virus from the incident, and lastly Sherry Birkin, a young girl who Leon and Claire rescue from the city. Next game you want to play is Resident Evil 3. This will have you return to Jill Valentine's events in the franchise. After the STARS team disbanded, she went back to her apartment moments before the outbreak begins. When a new monster, Nemesis, breaks into her home, she is forced to leave Raccoon City. Nemesis is a creature sent by Umbrella and tasked with eliminating any STARS members that know the truth about Umbrella. You'll battle through this short but thrillingly intense game and witness the destruction of Raccoon City, bringing an end to the epidemic, and as to why RE3 is best to play through last out of the Raccoon City games. Next we have another little side game that you can definitely skip if you want, as it's not very good. Resident Evil Survivor sees you as a boring and pretty forgettable new character, Ark Thompson, who supposedly is old friends with Leon Kennedy. He crashes on Sheena Island with amnesia, and lo and behold, the T-virus from Raccoon City has infected this island too. It's not a good story, but if you're wanting to see all of this series' canon, this incident is referenced by other Resident Evil games. Back to the must-plays, the next game on your timeline is Resident Evil Code Veronica. This game sees you return as Claire Redfield, who is continuing her search for her brother. Upon raiding an Umbrella facility, she is caught and locked up in a prison on Rockfort Island, which, you guessed it, currently has another outbreak of the T-virus. In the prison, Claire teams up with Steve Burnside, and the two manage to escape the island, but Code Veronica villain Alfred Ashford redirects their getaway plane to the nearest Umbrella facility in Antarctica. Whilst back on Rockfort Island, we see the return of Chris Redfield, as he shows up to save his sister, but is too late. Instead, he meets back with Albert Wesker, this being Wesker's return appearance as well, and he's since left Umbrella and has superpowers. Code Veronica is a very classic feeling RE game and might be tough for newcomers to the series to get into today, but is still a glorious game with a great plot and sees the long awaited team up of Chris and Claire Redfield. Next we have another fairly skippable entry, Resident Evil Dead Aim, which tells the story of an ex-Umbrella employee, Morpheus Duval, who has stolen a strain of the T-virus and escaped on an Umbrella ocean liner, the Spencer Rain. They threaten the US and China, demanding a ransom, else they'll fire the virus in a missile towards both countries. You play as another forgettable character, Bruce McGivern, who is sent by the US government to take Morpheus down. Why Leon or Chris or maybe even a squad of government soldiers weren't sent in instead is beyond me. Bruce will team up with China's special agent also on board, Fong Ling. You'll battle more T-virus monsters and save the day. This one I'll say is fairly skippable again, but Resident Evil The Darkside Chronicles comes next on the timeline, and is the reappearance for Leon Kennedy. While a good portion of the game is a revision of Resident Evil 2 and Code Veronica, there is a new chapter called Operation Javier which is canon. Now working for the US government as a special agent, Leon Kennedy is dispatched to South America alongside his new partner Jack Krauser to look for cartel leader Javier Hidalgo, who supposedly has the T-Veronica virus. During their battle with Hidalgo, Jack Krauser gets injured and is forced to leave the army. This will send him down a darker path parallel to Leon's. The next of the Chronicles light gun games is Resident Evil The Umbrella Chronicles. The final chapter of this game, Umbrella's End, sees Chris Redfield team back up once again with Jill Valentine, who both head towards the last known Umbrella facility in Russia. The duo, as well as Albert Wesker, but from a different angle, take down the facility and its projects. This would have Umbrella declare bankruptcy and the infamous company would go bust. Our next main game in the timeline is Resident Evil 4. This kicks off a new start in the Resident Evil franchise post-Umbrella. You'll play as Leon Kennedy once more, who heads out to rural Spain to rescue the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, who has been kidnapped. Upon arriving, Leon meets no zombies, but instead a parasite known as Las Plagas has infected the villagers and they've all gone a little mad. Resident Evil 4 is a fantastic game that you'll very much enjoy from beginning to end. It also sees the return of the mysterious Ada Wong and has a separate, shorter campaign which sees the events of the game from her perspective. In the climax of the game, Leon runs back into his old partner, Jack Krauser. A pivotal game in the series, RE4 shapes the future of Resident Evil. The next main game to play is Resident Evil Revelations. This game sees you return as Jill Valentine in her now 4th playable appearance. She is a member of the newly formed BSAA, a team formed to combat bioterrorism. She is partnered with new character Parker Luciani and investigate a bioterrorist organisation called Il Veltro aboard a ship known as the Queen Zenobia, whilst also looking for their missing team members Jessica Sherrawat and good old Chris Redfield. Revelations acts as a nice throwback to the horror atmosphere of the older titles, and another great team up with fan favourites Chris and Jill. Revelations will also introduce you to 3 new companies: the aforementioned BSAA organisation, a peacekeeping company known as TerraSave, and the mysterious Tricell. Let's take a quick break from Chris and Jill and video games in general with the next entry on our timeline, Resident Evil Degeneration. This is skippable, but it's a fairly fun CGI movie which feels like watching the cutscenes to a game, and has Leon and Claire team up once more. It seems the T-virus wasn't over, it's now infected a plane and the local airport. Leon is investigating the matter sent by the president, whereas Claire is now working for the human rights agency known as TerraSave. The two need to discover the reappearance of the T-virus and end it for good. Next in the timeline, boot up RE5 and in the extras play the DLC Lost in Nightmares. This DLC shows Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine catch up with Albert Wesker. Jill sacrifices herself to defeat Wesker, with the two plummeting out the window and into the abyss. While it's not out yet until July, the upcoming Netflix exclusive series Resident Evil Infinite Darkness is set between RE5's DLC and its main game, so it's here on the timeline for when it releases, and will follow once again Leon and Claire. Back to the main entries, your next game is Resident Evil 5. This game sees Chris Redfield travel to Africa to investigate yet more bioterrorism. He teams up with Sheva Alomar, who reported on the outbreak. Chris and Sheva dig deep into a conspiracy plot and discover that Jill Valentine is very much still alive, just with new blonde hair and under Wesker's influence. Save Africa, save Jill, save Sheva's inventory, punch some boulders, and have a glorious final battle with Albert Wesker is all what awaits in Resident Evil 5. The next main game is Resident Evil Revelations 2. This game follows 2 different perspectives. First, there's the return of Claire Redfield, who along with Moira Burton are kidnapped and awake on a random island run by none other than Alex Wesker, another of Umbrella's Wesker experiments. You'll also play as Barry Burton, who returns from the original Resident Evil, this time as a lead character. He arrives on the island to rescue his daughter Moira. In his chapters he encounters a little girl called Natalia, who can see enemies through walls. This is another fun RE game that acts as a fitting epilogue to the Wesker saga. After Revelations 2, return back to your film collection and watch Resident Evil Damnation. This is another skippable entry, but if you're a fan of Leon, you'll get a fairly fun popcorn action horror here. Essentially, Leon gets caught in an Eastern Slav Republic civil war, whilst investigating potential uses of BOWs in the area. After being ordered to leave by the US government, Leon refuses the orders and stays, uncovering a plot to use the BOWs to win the civil war. Next up, without a doubt the most skippable entry on the timeline, is Umbrella Corps. Here you'll play as a soldier collecting data from previous locations in the series. Enough said. Next on your timeline is arguably the biggest Resident Evil game in the franchise for just how much ground this game covers, Resident Evil 6. This game is like the conclusion of the past 20 games and films. We've got 4 campaigns. First, play through Jake and Sherry's campaign. Here you'll play as Jake Mueller, Albert Wesker's son, and Sherry Birkin. Yes, the same Sherry Birkin who Leon and Claire rescued from Raccoon City all those years ago. She's now a member of the BSAA, like Chris and Jill. It turns out there's a new virus on the loose called the C virus, and Jake is the key to a vaccine. Sherry is tasked with extracting Jake, but the duo are hunted down by a nemesis-like monster called Usternak, and an imposter of Ada Wong. Next, play Chris's campaign. You'll once again return as Chris Redfield, who teams up with BSAA member Pierce to contain the C virus and fight back the newly formed Neo Umbrella, led by the imposter of Ada Wong. Then it's on to Leon's campaign, arguably the best. The US is attacked with the C virus and Leon has to execute the infected president. Leon and fellow agent Helena Harper investigate Neo Umbrella and reach the conclusion that the National Security Advisor Derek Simmons was behind the attack and set out to get justice. Finally, you can play Ada Wong's campaign, which shows the conclusion to the RE6 campaign with Neo Umbrella coming to an end. After Resident Evil 6 is the latest animated movie and latest appearance of Leon Kennedy, Resident Evil Vendetta. This movie is again skippable if you wish. It's another popcorn action flick that involves Chris Redfield and Leon Kennedy team up to investigate the appearance of a new virus. Rebecca Chambers from RE1 and 0 makes a delightful return and is one of the better aspects of the film. The rest is over the top and pretty forgettable action, but so far is the latest we've seen of Leon Kennedy. From there, we're on to a brand new horizon, potentially the start of a new trilogy. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard is next on your timeline and follows a brand new protagonist, Ethan Winters, who is searching for his wife, Mia. During his search, he comes across the Baker estate and you'll fight through lots of mold-like enemies and deal with the members of the Baker family. Arguably the scariest game in the franchise, Resident Evil 7 is a thrill ride that you'll very much enjoy. Make sure to then play the DLC stories that share more insight to the Baker family and even add a fun return for Chris Redfield. And then, the latest game you want to play is the new Resident Evil 8 Village. This game follows on from Ethan Winters' story in RE7 and Chris Redfield's DLC. Ethan's daughter has been kidnapped and is missing in a Romanian village. This village has also been tainted by the mold, and its 4 lords have become twisted and mutated because of it. Resident Evil Village adapts classic monsters such as werewolves, vampires and witches into the mythos of Resident Evil, and even has further backstory on the formation of Umbrella and more insight to Ethan's character. And that'll bring you all up to date on the Resident Evil series thus far. So where do you think we'll go from here? What has Alex Wesker got planned now that she's in the body of Natalia? And where will Ethan Winters' story go after the end of Resident Evil 8? I'll be here to cover it all, so stay with Don Critic and thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.